Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where executive coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hey there, friends. How are you? It's Alicia Cowan, executive coach. I hope you all are having the most amazing summer. I am recording this like midsummer. It's June, mid-June, and we're just having the best time. We're just going through a season, and really a season change. It's my favorite season of the year. So try to really soak it up. My last episode on this podcast was all about the summer reset, and so how this season really like helps transition into like the midpoint of the year into the back half of the year, and the days are longer, and I love the season. So I'm trying to soak up as much of it as possible. I think I said in my last podcast, I'm in this kind of recovery mode of coming off of a surgery and trying to rest as much as possible and really letting my body like come back and feeling so much better every single day and every single week. And so that's been really nice. And we're getting ready for some massive friend and family time. We're about to go on some vacations here as we are out of school for the summer with the kids, and we're going to take some time to meet up with some friends we haven't seen in a long time. So a lot of really fun summer stuff coming on. And so I hope you are having a good summer, and I hope you are having a good time. And I want to really dive into a topic, and I've been thinking about it for the back half of the year. You know, we focused a lot in the front half of the year on a lot of difficult conversations. And one conversation that I think can be difficult both to give and to receive is talking about executive presence. I want to talk about what it is, why it matters, and how you can actually recognize and build it, whether it's in yourself and you're receiving that feedback that you need to improve it, or you're delivering it. And you're in this executive level, there's a lot of times you are doing both. I think for me as an executive coach, this is something that comes up for me that I hear a lot. People wanting it and wanting to get and build this as a skill. And I hear a lot of it delivered as well, sharing the feedback with direct reports or their leadership teams and saying it's something, a skill that they often see as a gap. But what I also see is a lot of times people struggle with what it means. It's also one of the most vague pieces of feedback out there. I think it's right up there, probably matched with strategic mindset. And I think a lot of times it leaves people wondering, well, what exactly does that mean? And what do I do with that feedback? And so this podcast is meant to help if you need to either deliver this feedback in a very tangible way, or if you've received the feedback and you want to make it more tangible with tactical steps for yourself, or both. Maybe you're in both camps. So that's what we're going to dive in and talk about today. And again, I think it's a difficult conversation. And why I tie it back to that is because I think sometimes we don't have always the language. And so I want to share that. I want to share and start with what executive presence actually is and give you some language to define it. So in clear, human, simple terms, that sense you get when somebody walks into a room, again, whether it's a physical room or a Zoom room, a virtual room, and they immediately can have the attention of the room. And not because they're the most loud, extroverted person, but because they're super grounded and they have that like it factor. Sometimes we call it gravitas, or sometimes like we say they have command of the room, but it's not command in the sense of being like a dictator, but command in the sense of having that presence, and it's still kind. That's kind of that it, right? That's that it factor of executive presence. But let's break it down. Like I said, I don't want this to be vague. I want it to be tangible as possible. So here's some core components that I broke it down into that hopefully will help. I think one of the first core components of executive presence is the ability to have confidence without arrogance. And we call that just, I guess, humility. So I think confident confidence in an executive leader means that you can be confident in yourself and your abilities. You can be confident in what you're saying, yet you're still humble enough to know that even though you're confident in what you're saying, you're humble enough to know you don't know it all, and you can also listen to others' inputs. I think this might be tied back to EQ, but I think confidence without arrogance really kind of sums that up, right? The second thing is very clear, intentional communication. We'll dive into that one a little bit more later. The third is that emotional intelligence that I've alluded to, but emotional intelligence and composure. So I break that down as somebody that can read the room. And what I mean by that is they can understand the temperature of the room, they can understand like what's happening, the tone, and they don't necessarily have to react to the room. They don't have to, just because someone may be, reacting in an emotional way, they don't necessarily have to match that. And so they don't necessarily have to get defensive or frustrated or angry. They're also not rattled. They can be very calm, even if things get off course. And they also have that ability to redirect. If they stay composed, they can like handle the emotional swings and then bring the group back together to get back and to stay focused. The next one is strategic thinking and vision. And again, I know this one's super vague, but when we're talking about it in the sense of executive presence, it basically means that when you're in the room, you can connect what's going on to a broader, bigger picture. And you could also like step out of the micro view and step back to the macro view. Meaning you can think about the future, perhaps, or you can think and connect what you're talking about to some of the larger goals of the organization. Maybe it's bringing it back to values, or bringing it back to mission, or bringing it back to an organizational goal, right? And you have that ability to tie it back and share the why to make sure everybody feels super connected. And two more. The next is authenticity and integrity, meaning you are not faking it. You also, with the integrity piece, you're doing what you say, you're saying what you do, and you are trustworthy. You can walk the walk and talk the talk at the same time, right? You're not fake. The last is the very strong presence of having great body language and great vocal presence. So, pretty self-explanatory there, but having openness in the body language and having the ability to speak up without over speaking or interrupting people. You have a strong vocal presence, and you're not weak. You're not being muted by the rest of the group. So those are kind of some of the things I think summarize. I think there can be a lot more, but I think it helps really determine and define some of those executive presence factors that we always name. Now let's talk about why it's so hard to pin down. So I think that executive presence can feel very vague or subjective. You hear those phrases, hey, you'll know it when you see it, or you struggle with articulating with feedback and you leave the recipient wondering, like, again, how do I handle this and what do I do exactly? So I want to share this. I think the more that you can break it down into observable behaviors, then you can actually help the recipient or yourself understand how to build the skill. So the more that we can make the case of naming it, again, meaning it, naming the behavior of executive presence, and then if we can name it, then we can go about developing it. And we should. Again, if this is something that you've either received or given, we know that executive presence can really be a deal breaker in somebody's career. And so that's why I encourage you, the more that we can articulate exactly what it looks like, naming it, then we know what to do and we can work on it. So let's now phase into it. We understand what it is. We understand why it's important. Let's move into those practical tips. I want to work into how we can spot some of those things and articulate them. So this is going to be a blend of both some tips and tricks of like how we could work on it, but also how you can spot it in others. So this is perfect for you if you're trying to develop it in your teams. Okay, let's dive in. We've got 7 tips that we're going to go through to help you with building and recognizing executive presence. The first, communication skills. So this looks like speaking clearly, speaking with intent, getting to the point early, avoiding unnecessary backstory or unnecessary detail, and avoiding those fillers or what I call like the hedges. So that can be things like the fillers or words like those hesitations, hedges can be things like I think. It's like diminishing it, right? It's taking some of the power away, maybe, possibly, and apologizing, saying you're sorry. I had a leader that would always apologize when there was absolutely no need to apologize. So any of those words that kind of get in the way of being to the point and clear. Communication skills also look like using storytelling to connect the ideas, but not to dominate airtime, right? So like unrelated stories or unrelated detail that like takes up too much and doesn't get to like the bottom line. Also, listening actively, meaning you're not just a passive listener waiting to your turn to speak, but you're actually listening and hearing what is being said in the room and understanding how that is impacting the room. Your presence can be felt by just as much as how you speak as how well you are actively listening within the room. And then here's the tip. Here's how you can spot this in others. Do they make their point succinctly? Do they adapt to the room? And are they elevating conversations? What fillers or hedges might they be using? This is really great to kind of see like how you can make it really tangible in that way. All right, second one, body language and vocal presence. Does the speaker sit, stand with purpose? How's their posture? What are their gestures looking like? Are they open or are they more closed? How's their eye contact? And even how are they using silence effectively to their advantage? How you can spot it in others. You can watch others in the room and see if they command attention quietly without being flashy. A lot of times I have people ask, do you need to be an extrovert in order to have executive presence? And you don't. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the most outgoing and gregarious in the room. You can also command and watch the room by being quiet. And so a way that you can spot this is to see how others are reacting to people in the room. It's very easy sometimes to pick out who is the actual leader in the room by how others are reacting to them. Okay. Emotional intelligence and composure. That's our next one. So again, if you're looking at a leader, you're asking yourself, are they staying grounded under pressure? Again, not every meeting is like a pressure cooker meeting, and it's not always going to be that type of environment. But when asked a question or maybe put on the spot or having to present, do they stay grounded or do they get rattled? Also, do they have the ability to show empathy without losing authority? Meaning, do they have the ability to get on someone's side, understand where they're coming from, but not just succumb to whatever is being asked? They can still hold people accountable without completely being callous about it. All right. How do you spot this in others? Well, when you're watching the room, notice if someone listens, even when it's hard to listen, and do they respond, not just react? What that means is, can they navigate conflict while keeping everybody at ease? I've seen leaders do this so beautifully in meetings where they have the ability to be firm and hold people accountable and use words in a way that still navigate being, I don't know, a challenged, I guess, and for lack of a better word, but challenged in the room, and they navigate it with just such ease and grace without putting anybody at ease. It really is an art to have that beautiful emotional intelligence and composure. So notice when you can spot it in others, and then start to use some of the words that we've shared here to articulate feedback if you need to give somebody feedback around their emotional intelligence and their composure. All right, the next one is that one about strategic mindset and influence. Again, which strategic mindset in and of itself can be sometimes vague. So a way that you can articulate this is being strategic in a meeting at times can be something like along the lines of like not just sharing the tasks at hand, which again, most times is super important during a meeting about who is doing what by when, but also communicating the why. It doesn't need to be a big drawn out why. You can get just really clear and to the point about how some of the daily actions that we have to take, some of the more menial tasks we take, can still connect to the bigger goals or still connect to the vision. It can be super simple, okay? and how you can spot this in others. If someone is asking very thoughtful, very future focused questions, that's a way you can see it. They are actually shaping direction and they're not steamrolling others. All right. So again, somebody that's using like the big picture, they're thinking about the future, they're thinking about the future goals and the mission of the company, and they're not just plowing through others to get there. They're bringing people along with them, they're inspiring, they're influencing their group, not just like driving people through commands and authority. Okay. All right. Next one, consistency and authenticity. Okay. So this one's simple. It's doing what you say, keeping your integrity. Integrity is presence in a meeting, and your tone and your body language have to match your message. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that, if you're saying we back our values and we do these things, we're all about like people being, people focused, etc. If you say those things, but then how you treat people in meetings is not in line with that, you are out of integrity. That is not authentic. So you have to make sure the tone and the body language match the message. How you spot this in others? Well, typically they're not necessarily the loudest, but people trust them. If you're watching somebody else, you could feel it in how they lead the meetings, or perhaps they're delivering really tough messages with really calm clarity. All right. Last two, here we go. Preparation and professional presence. So when you're getting ready for some of these meetings, you want to be ready for them. You want to know your purpose of going into the meeting, why you're there, what impact you need to make. And if you're presenting, you need to know your material. You need to know the agenda and you need to be ready to present it. You have to go in being super respectful of other people's time by having clarity and with your brevity. So, how you can spot this in others. This person will walk into a meeting with clarity. They are super laser focused and they leave people with the feeling of being very clear with clear purpose, not more confused than when they walked in. You know how sometimes you'll have the meeting after the meeting and people are so confused about what actually happened and what they're supposed to do? That would be an indication that this is not happening. So do they leave the meeting clear? That's how you can spot it in others. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about something we call like the 3x3 model. The 3x3 model can help you build awareness around executive presence. And so it's really, really simple. First piece of the 3x3 model is gravitas. And the three words that define it are confidence, calm, and credibility. Okay, so that's gravitas in a simple way. The second is authority. Three words to describe authority: boldness, decisiveness, and trust. So again, you get authority by making decisions, having that integrity, having boldness in the meeting. The third is expression. Can you be clear? Do you have clarity amongst everyone in the meeting, all the recipients of the message in the meeting? Do you have the ability to storytell? And again, when we talk about storytelling, it's not like telling like child story, but it's the ability to express and talk about what you're telling, what we are trying to explain through different ideas or real situations, scenarios, storytelling. And then vocal presence. That's the third. Okay. So gravitas, authority, expression, and then those three words that makes up the 3x3 model. It helps build awareness because it gives some more tangible words to what we're trying to explain with executive presence. So I want you to think of a colleague that may show this. What exactly do they do? What do they say? How do they say it? And that can help give you some of the words to help with the feedback. All right, so those are the 7 overall ways you can recognize executive presence, and some of the tips were how you can spot it in others, giving you more language, giving you more thoughtfulness around perhaps delivering that feedback. So let's move on to the next piece, delivering the feedback. Here's why feedback can be so tricky around executive presence. As we've stated throughout this, it can feel very vague for someone receiving the feedback. And other times, it also feels very personal when you start talking about someone's executive presence. So here's what we want to do. We want to remove both of those things. We want to make it very specific and very actionable. We want to link it back to behaviors. Again, so if we link it back to things like behaviors that they can change, that doesn't feel so personal. And so we want to take all of those factors and make it clean and clear. So I'm going to give you a model around it. And again, if you want to talk about, dive more deeply into delivering feedback and using some of the formulas, I have tons of great podcasts on delivering feedback. Again, beginning half of this year, we talked a lot about delivering tough conversations to include feedback, but I want to keep it simple. You want to keep it in a simple way. So I'm going to give you 4 steps really simply. You want to talk about an I statement. An I statement is just something where you say, here's what I've noticed. Then you want to give the behavior that you noticed. Then you want to describe the impact. Here's what I've noticed. Here's the impact it had on the situation at hand. Next, third step, you want to ask for feedback. What do you think? What's your thoughts about that? Am I right? Am I off? What's your opinion? And then once you can come to consensus about like what you saw and observed, then you decide how you want to move forward together. Okay, we can agree that this. How do we want to move forward and take action on that for next time? Keep it simple. So, for example, you could say something like, I noticed in yesterday's meeting your ability to stay calm, even though the plan completely changed midstream, really helped the team refocus. Impact. The team walked out with clarity. They understood exactly what to do. That's the positive feedback I have for you. What did you feel? What did you think about the meeting? Great. We can agree. We can repeat that next time. Okay. So again, I gave you in this previous section all those like tangible examples of things that you could mention that you may have noticed. And then you can use this as formula as a sample script to have that coaching conversation. And really great observations you can use. If you're using this for yourself, I would encourage you after like key meetings where you're having to exhibit executive presence, self-reflection can be a massive thing. And it also allows you to lead by modeling vulnerability. So self-reflect, ask for feedback, and it shows others that you're working on this too. All right. So let's dive a little bit deeper. How do you develop executive presence in up and coming aspiring leaders? Here's my tips. Number 1, you got to model it first. As an executive in the company, your job is to set the tone and set the example. People are watching you. And so by modeling executive presence, by using some of the examples that I gave throughout this podcast, using like that 3x3 model as an example, it gives language and structure to what you're doing and the feedback, and even using those terms when you're describing your own executive presence. You can also encourage some opportunities where executive presence is required. You can give some people some different opportunities to stretch into executive presence, meaning additional presentations that are maybe lower risk. Maybe it's dealing with conflicts. Maybe there are points where decisions have to be made, and you can encourage, some of your upcoming leaders to speak first on what those decisions might look like. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you normalize feedback. Create these feedback loops during maybe one-on-ones or touch bases that we love talking about, encouraging a great one-on-one practice, but normalize it. When you're having those one-on-ones, when you're having touch bases, create these feedback loops that just make it completely normal to talk about executive presence and their leadership voice. If that is something that you are currently working on, deliver feedback frequently, especially those wins. It'll encourage the positive behavior. Okay, friends, here's the key points. Executive presence is seen in behavior. It can be developed. It just starts with the awareness of what those executive presence behaviors are or aren't. And that's what we kind of dove into today. That's what we talked about, is trying to make it more tangible, more tactical with words and using behaviors. So rather than telling a leader, you need to up your executive presence, you can pick out some of those things that we just talked about. Maybe they're really great in one area, but they need to work on another. Maybe they have really great empathy, but they're using too many hedges and fillers, like we talked about. Like they have really great ability to read the room, but when they speak, it almost diminishes their executive presence because they're using too many filler words. That's so tangible and tactical, and it helps somebody understand what executive presence is versus just leaving it as a blanket statement. So giving that awareness and clarity to someone with that feedback is so helpful and able to give them ability to make a difference. So here's my call to action for you. Observe somebody in your world who demonstrates that executive presence, practice it, break it down. What do they do? How can you either try one of those behaviors yourself and or share it with a direct report, share it with someone that you're mentoring, give them that feedback to share with them how those behaviors might help them in the future. Okay. I want to hear how this is going. Executive presence is something that you all talk about and brings to me so much. So listeners, if you want to share stories or you have questions for a future episode, reach out to me. As always, if you need help with any of this, go to my website. On the very front page, you can just click the button that says work with me and you can set up a meeting with me directly. You have access to my calendar and you can get on my calendar to talk to me. I'd love to hear from you. And as a reminder, we are still in the middle of June. So we are still working on what I call the summer reset package. What it is 6 sessions with me, one-on-one coaching that if you are working through something where you would like to reset for the summer, you want to go back into the back half of the year with a clean, clear vision, I'm offering that quick summer reset to help you get focused, to get back on track, and to get the one-on-one custom coaching to you that you need for that clarity. Again, same option. Go to my website, aliciacowancoaching.com. It's ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. Literally, front page, it's right there. Click the button that says work with me. You can set up a meeting, we can talk, and we'll go from there. And as always, I appreciate you listening. I hope you're having a wonderful summer, and we will talk to you next time. Bye, friends.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.